My husband ignored my pregnancy restrictions, forced me into sex, and now wants me to forgive him. I am 24 years old, and my husband is 31. We have been married for 4 years, and we have been together for 6. Until recently, I honestly thought we had a very loving marriage. We have had disagreements before, of course. Every couple does. But we had never had a huge fight like this. I had never looked at him and wondered if I was safe around him. That changed during my pregnancy. I am currently 33 weeks pregnant with our first baby. 3 weeks from now, I am scheduled to have a C-section because of a complication with my pregnancy. When I was 20 weeks pregnant, my doctor diagnosed me with placenta previa. For anyone who doesn't know, placenta previa is a condition where the placenta is positioned over or very close to the opening of the cervix. My doctor initially told me that there was a good chance the placenta would move as the baby grew. Unfortunately, mine didn't. Because of that, my pregnancy became more complicated. At 20 weeks, I was put on some basic restrictions. At 30 weeks, those restrictions became much more serious. My doctor told me not to run, not to lift heavy things, not to climb, and not to remain standing for more than 3 hours at a time. But the most important restriction was that I was not supposed to have sex. I was also told not to have vaginal examinations unless absolutely necessary. My doctor explained why very clearly. With placenta previa, anything that irritates the cervix or causes bleeding could become dangerous. The goal was to avoid anything that might cause heavy bleeding, trigger premature labor, or put the baby and me at risk. So I followed the instructions. I didn't think there was anything strange about that. I was carrying our baby. I wanted our baby to be born safely. If my doctor told me that I needed to avoid something for a few weeks, I was going to avoid it. My husband, however, did not seem to take the restrictions seriously. For the past 3 weeks, he had been asking me for sex almost every day. Every single time, I told him no. I reminded him that my doctor had specifically told me not to have sex. Sometimes I explained it calmly. Sometimes I was frustrated because I was exhausted and uncomfortable and didn't feel like I should have to keep defending the same medical restriction over and over again. He didn't like my answer. He started telling me that doctors exaggerate things. Eventually, he began saying that doctors sometimes make pregnancy complications sound worse than they really are because they want to protect themselves or make more money. He also started saying that doctors push women toward C-sections because it is easier for them. I mostly ignored him. I told him that whether he believed my doctor or not didn't matter. I believed my doctor. She was the person taking care of me and the baby, and I was going to follow her instructions. But he kept pushing. Then one day, he stopped respecting my answer. We had sex even though I had repeatedly told him that I wasn't supposed to. I don't want to go into every detail of what happened, but I clearly told him I couldn't. I reminded him of the restrictions. I did not want to do it. He forced me anyway. Afterward, I started bleeding. At first, I tried to convince myself that everything was fine. Then the bleeding became heavy. I completely panicked. I locked myself in the bathroom and started crying. I was terrified. All I could think about was my baby. I was only 33 weeks pregnant. I kept imagining that something had gone terribly wrong and that I might have to have my baby immediately. I was scared that the bleeding meant I was going into premature labor. I called my doctor. She told me to come to the hospital immediately. The entire drive there, I was sobbing. I kept imagining myself having an emergency C-section and my baby being born at only 33 weeks. Thankfully, when I arrived, the doctors determined that I was not in premature labor. I was bleeding, but fortunately, it stopped. The baby was okay. I was okay. But while I was being examined, my doctor asked my husband to leave the room. Once he was gone, she asked me some questions. She asked whether I had done anything that I had been told not to do. She immediately told me that she wasn't accusing me of anything and that she simply needed to know what might have caused the bleeding. I finally admitted that I had had sex. She went over my restrictions with me again. Then she gave me information about domestic violence and support services. She even put the information directly into my purse. I was incredibly embarrassed. At the time, I didn't fully understand why she had given me those papers. I think part of me was still trying to convince myself that what had happened wasn't as serious as it felt. On the way home, I completely broke down. I yelled at my husband. I told him never to do that to me again. I told him that my doctor knew more about my condition than he did, and that I was going to follow her instructions whether he agreed with them or not. He apologized. And honestly, I believed that he was genuinely sorry. But I couldn't just forget what happened. 4 days afterward, I was angry with him. He kept apologizing and asking me how long I was going to hold it against him. I told him, at least until the baby is born. At the time, I thought that was the end of it. I thought maybe he had finally understood how serious things were. I was wrong. Update 7 hours later. I posted my story only about 7 hours ago, and I honestly cannot believe how many people responded. I don't even know how to thank everyone who took the time to write something thoughtful to me. Originally, I planned to tell my doctor everything at my next appointment. I was also considering telling my sister-in-law and possibly my brother, although I was nervous about talking to them because I knew they would have strong opinions about my husband. After reading the comments, I realized how serious the situation actually was. And now I'm scared. I rescheduled my weekly appointment with my doctor for tomorrow. A lot of people told me that I could simply walk into the hospital or doctor's office, but I didn't want to do that without knowing what I was going to say. I also didn't want to make up an excuse to my husband about where I was going. The comments made me realize that I needed someone I trusted. So I called my sister-in-law after she got off work. We talked for a very long time. My sister-in-law and my brother have never really liked my husband. My sister-in-law especially has always been suspicious of him. I used to think she was being unfair because, in my mind, he was my loving husband. But when I told her what had happened, she was incredibly supportive. At one point during the conversation, I finally said something I had been struggling to admit. It wasn't just that he had pressured me into sex. It was rape. Saying that out loud made everything feel different. I told her about some of the things that had happened over the years that I had previously ignored or made excuses for. I told her about things my mother had also brushed aside because she liked my husband. My sister-in-law was furious. I think a part of me always knew she would be. Maybe that's why I had never told her everything before. She told me that I needed to speak honestly with my doctor. She said she would talk to my brother, and that they would figure out what they could do to help me. She also told me she was going to come to me on the first flight she could get. My brother couldn't come immediately because they have children of their own, but I understood. For the first time in days, I felt like I wasn't completely alone. My doctor's appointment was scheduled for the next day. Then my husband came home early. I was visibly upset. I had planned to pull myself together before he got home, but I didn't have enough time. He noticed immediately. And this is the part that makes everything so confusing for me. He was kind. He was worried about me. He asked what was wrong. Normally, I would tell him. He has always been the person I tell when something is bothering me. Even after everything that had happened, part of me was still used to thinking of him as my safe person. I know how strange that sounds. I was struggling to understand how the person I had loved for 6 years could also be the person who had hurt me. I finally told him. I told him that I was scared. I told him that what he had done had hurt me. And then I told him the truth. I said, "You forced me to have sex with you." He immediately reacted. He looked shocked and said something like, "What? Don't say that." He told me that what I was saying was a serious accusation. He asked if I understood what I was accusing him of. At first, I started apologizing. I was still caught in the habit of making him feel better whenever he was upset. But then something inside me changed. I realized that I did understand. I understood exactly what I was saying. I told him that yes, I understood. I told him that it was rape. He became angry. He called me names. He said I was being ridiculous for using that word. He told me that sex between a husband and wife couldn't be rape. I tried to walk away because I didn't want to argue anymore. But he grabbed my wrist. I pulled my hand away immediately. He put his hands up and sarcastically apologized, saying that maybe what he had done could be considered something else if we were using my definitions. That tone made me even more upset. I told him that I didn't want to be around him. He said, "Fine. I'll leave." I told him, "No. I want to leave. I need to get away from you." He threw his credit card toward me and told me to go get a hotel. And that's where I am now. Sitting here, trying to understand how my marriage got to this point. For 6 years, I thought I knew this man. I thought he was the person who would protect me. I thought he was the person who would protect our baby. Instead, I am pregnant, frightened, and trying to figure out how I could have been so wrong about someone I trusted with my entire life. I don't know what happens next. But I do know one thing now. My doctor's instructions were never something my husband had the right to argue with. My body was never something he was entitled to. And being married to me never meant he had the right to ignore my no. I was terrified to leave, but my baby gave me a reason to be brave. I never thought I would be sitting somewhere alone, typing a story like this and wondering what my life was going to look like from this point forward. For a long time, I kept telling myself that things would get better. I kept making excuses for my husband. I kept thinking that maybe I was overreacting, maybe things weren't as bad as they felt, or maybe if I just tried harder, he would go back to the person I thought he was when we first met. But eventually, I reached a point where I knew I couldn't keep living that way. I knew I wanted to leave. The problem was that I was pregnant, and I was terrified of what would happen when I actually tried to do it. My husband had called me several times, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I had never seen him that angry before. The thought of telling him directly that I wanted to leave and take our baby with me scared me more than I can explain. He was the one who wanted us to have a child. I had been unsure at first, but eventually, I agreed because I believed we could build a family together. Now I was sitting there, pregnant with his child, wondering if he would ever let me walk away peacefully. Every time my daughter moved inside me, I felt two completely different emotions at once. I loved her so much. But sometimes when she kicked, I wanted to cry. Not because I didn't want her. It was the complete opposite. I wanted her more than anything. I was just terrified of what my situation meant for her. I never imagined that becoming a mother would make me feel so afraid. I kept thinking about the future. Would I be able to take her somewhere safe? Would my husband try to stop me? Would he use the fact that we were married against me? Would I accidentally make one wrong decision that gave him an advantage? Those thoughts kept running through my head. My sister-in-law was on her way to help me, but I was far away from home. I just needed to make it through that night. I had already spoken to the hotel staff and explained what was happening. Thankfully, they seemed to understand and were willing to help me. Knowing that someone around me knew what was happening made me feel a little less alone. I wanted to return to my home state before my daughter was born. I wanted to be close to my sister-in-law and my brother. I wanted people around me who I trusted. But I was scared to make the trip. The drive was around 20 hours, and I was already heavily pregnant. I also had less than 3 weeks before my expected due date. I didn't know what was legally safe to do, and I was terrified that making the wrong move could give my husband a reason to try to take my daughter away from me. I was trying my best. That was all I could do. I also knew that my husband would never willingly allow me to go through labor or a C-section without him being there. I didn't know how I would handle that. Then something happened that changed everything. On August 7th, I had my first experience with Braxton Hicks contractions. I wasn't planning to go to the hospital because I wasn't sure they were serious enough. People encouraged me to get checked anyway. Thank goodness I listened. By the time I reached the hospital, I was bleeding heavily. The blood was running down my legs. The doctors quickly realized something was seriously wrong. I had suffered a placental abruption. Everything happened so fast after that. There was no time for me to sit and think about what I wanted to do. No time to worry about the 20-hour drive. No time to plan my future. The only thing that mattered was getting my baby out safely. At 10:37 p.m. on August 7th, my daughter was born by emergency C-section. She was only 33 weeks and 5 days old. She was so tiny. When the doctors told me she needed to stay in the NICU, my heart broke. I wanted to hold her. I wanted to take her home. I wanted everything to be normal. Instead, my daughter was in one part of the hospital while I was recovering in another. I was scared, exhausted, and overwhelmed. But whenever I got to see her, everything else seemed smaller. Looking at her made me feel stronger. The nurses have been incredible. They have taken such good care of both of us, and everyone keeps telling me that if everything continues to go well, I should eventually be able to take my daughter home. That is the only thing I want. I want to take my baby home. My sister-in-law arrived shortly after my daughter was born, and she has stayed beside me ever since. Having her here has meant more to me than I can put into words. I have also had to deal with the legal side of everything much sooner than I ever expected. I have an attorney helping me understand my options. For now, I was advised to allow my husband to visit our daughter while she is in the NICU. I agreed. I don't believe he would hurt our daughter while she is in the hospital, and there are nurses and doctors around her constantly. So I felt comfortable allowing him to see her. He has visited her several times. I've also received messages from some of his co-workers and family members. They have been supportive toward me, which honestly surprised me. At the same time, I have a feeling my husband is telling people that everything between us is fine. He seems to be acting that way too. He has seen our daughter, and I believe he was at the hospital when I had my C-section, although I was so overwhelmed that I honestly don't remember everything clearly. This morning, he came into my room while the nurses were helping me take my first walk after surgery. I was emotional. I was exhausted. And despite everything that happened between us, I still let him comfort me. I cried in front of him. For a moment, I almost forgot why I was trying to leave. That is one of the hardest things to explain. When someone has hurt you, you don't automatically stop having feelings for them. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly hate them completely. There are memories. There are years together. There are moments when you still want the person you loved to be the person you believed they were. But then he said something that brought me right back to reality. He told me that I wouldn't have had to go through everything alone if I hadn't been acting that way. Then he grabbed my face and tried to force me to kiss him. That moment reminded me exactly why I am doing all of this. I cannot go back to the life I was living. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do next. Originally, I wanted to have my daughter in my home state so I could stay there with my brother and sister-in-law. I wanted to raise her around people who could support me. But I don't know whether my husband will allow me to take her there. My attorney says I have options, and that some of those options may be strongly in my favor. I also followed the advice people gave me and collected my medical records. Those records include documentation from previous incidents of abuse, including the one I had talked about before and 2 other times when I had gone to the hospital. My doctor has also documented in writing that my placental abruption may have been connected to trauma and severe stress. I know none of this guarantees what will happen. I know I still have a difficult road ahead. But right now, I'm trying not to think too far into the future. My daughter is only a few hours old. She is tiny. She is fragile. And she is already the most important person in my life. When I look at her, I don't think about my husband. I don't think about the arguments. I don't think about the fear. I don't think about everything that happened before she was born. I just look at her. I hold her tiny hand when I can. I watch her sleep. And I remind myself that I have to be strong. I want to be safe, but more than anything, I want her to be safe. I will not make a decision that puts her in danger just because I am desperate to escape my own situation. I have to think carefully. I have to listen to my attorney. I have to trust the people who are helping me. And I have to take things one day at a time. My daughter is only 16 hours old as I write this. And somehow, in those 16 hours, my entire world has changed. I don't know exactly what tomorrow will bring. I don't know where we will live. I don't know what will happen with my marriage. I don't know what the legal process will look like. But I know one thing for certain. I am her mother. And from this moment forward, everything I do will be about keeping her safe and giving her the life she deserves. For the first time in a very long time, I have something bigger than my fear. I have my daughter. And I am going to fight for both of us. I was bruised, they thought I was being abused, and then someone kept calling the police. I never expected something as simple as having bruises on my body to turn into one of the most stressful experiences of my life. I have a disability that affects my vision. I am blind in one eye, and because of that, I sometimes misjudge where things are. If I am not paying enough attention, I can walk into furniture, doors, walls, tables, or other random objects. It is embarrassing sometimes, but it is something I have learned to live with. Unfortunately, those accidents often leave me with bruises. The problem was that some of my classmates did not know that. They saw me coming to class with bruises on my arms, legs, and other parts of my body. Instead of asking me directly what had happened, some people apparently became convinced that I was being physically abused. At first, I did not even know anyone was concerned about me. Then one day, the police showed up. I was shocked. They told me that they had received a report that I might be suffering from abuse. They asked me questions about my home life, my family, and whether someone was hurting me. I explained everything. I told them about my disability and explained that I was blind in one eye. I told them that I sometimes bumped into things and that this was the reason I could have bruises without anyone hurting me. The police took the situation seriously, which I actually understood. They checked my home and spoke with my family. They were trying to make sure there wasn't something happening behind closed doors that I was too afraid to talk about. After looking into everything, they did not find any additional signs that I was being abused. They also asked me questions about my university life. Eventually, they got my address from the university because they were investigating a possible abuse report. My university took the situation seriously as well. When the university was contacted about me, they were extremely concerned, but their attitude was not judgmental. They genuinely seemed to want to make sure I was safe. After the police left, the university continued checking on me. I spoke with several people there, including a psychologist. They wanted to make sure I was okay mentally and that there were no signs that I was hiding abuse or being pressured into saying everything was fine. I answered their questions honestly. Eventually, everyone involved seemed satisfied that I was not being abused. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The bruises never stopped. I continued going to class like normal. Unfortunately, the bruises did not magically disappear. I was still accidentally running into things. I would come to class with a new bruise, and apparently that made some people even more suspicious. One day, one of my classmates approached me. She told me that another classmate, who I will call Kay, had been talking about me. According to my classmate, Kay was considering calling the police again because she believed I was still being abused. I was honestly frustrated. I understood that someone might become concerned if they saw a person constantly covered in bruises. But the police had already investigated me. My university had investigated me. I had explained my disability. My family had spoken to them. Still, Kay apparently believed something was wrong. I decided that I needed to protect myself from the situation becoming a cycle. I wrote down what my classmate had told me. I also collected information from a few other people who had heard similar things. Then, as I expected, the police showed up again. Once again, they asked me questions. Once again, I explained that I was not being abused. But this time, I also told the university something else. I told them that I believed Kay was using the police to repeatedly investigate me, even though there was no evidence that I was being abused. I didn't want Kay punished simply for being concerned about me. I wanted the constant police involvement to stop. The university decided that the best solution was to change our laboratory arrangements. Kay and I had been in the same labs, so the university moved her to a different lab group. That meant she would no longer be around me during those sessions and would not constantly see whether I had new bruises. At the time, I thought that was a reasonable solution. Kay did not. She became angry with me. She told me that I was ruining her university schedule and that she had only been trying to help me. I understood why she might have believed she was doing the right thing, but from my perspective, it had gone far beyond simply being concerned. I was becoming the person who had to deal with the consequences. Things became even worse. Eventually, I made an online post explaining what had happened. I never expected it to become such a huge situation. People started sharing the post, and I became worried that strangers might find me or start contacting me. I have seen stories online where someone posts about a personal problem and then gets harassed by hundreds of strangers. I did not want that to happen to me. I even considered deleting my account if things became too much. The irony of the whole situation was that I actually am a survivor of abuse from my past. That made everything much more complicated emotionally. I had experienced abuse before, and because of that history, I knew what it felt like to question whether something was normal or whether I should ask someone for help. My previous abuser was never arrested. I eventually moved away from him, partly because I felt guilty telling people how badly he had treated me. He had donated to charity and helped people attend university, and I kept thinking that because he had done good things for other people, maybe I was somehow wrong for talking about the bad things he had done to me. I know now that good actions do not erase abusive behavior. But when you have lived through abuse, figuring out what is necessary and what has gone too far can sometimes be incredibly difficult. So when people started judging me online, I found it especially painful. They did not know my history. They did not know what I had been through. They only knew the pieces of the story they could see. Then Kay called the police again. A little time passed. Kay and I still had one class together, even though we were no longer in the same lab. I thought that maybe things had finally settled down. I was wrong again. Kay apparently continued talking about me and telling people that she believed I was being abused. Then the police came again. This time, they told me that there had been multiple reports. I was confused. I asked how many people had reported me, but they could not tell me who had made the reports because of privacy protections surrounding abuse reports. I understood why they could not give me names. The whole purpose of keeping reporters' identities private is to protect people who report genuine abuse from retaliation. But from my perspective, it was frightening. I had no idea who was calling the police about me. It could have been Kay. It could have been other classmates. It could even have been people connected to her. I simply didn't know. The university had apparently tried to explain the situation to the police before they came, but the police still had to check on me because they were obligated to investigate reports of possible abuse. So once again, the same thing happened. They came. They asked questions. I explained my situation. They investigated. And once again, they found no evidence that I was being abused. This time, however, I made it very clear that I felt like someone was using the police to harass me. The police listened. They told me that they would keep track of future reports. They also explained that if someone continued making reports after being warned, they could potentially face consequences for harassment or misuse of police resources. For the first time, I felt like someone understood why I was frightened and frustrated. But the calls continued. About a week later, I found out that someone had called again. Apparently, the person even tried to use a different name. What they did not realize was that the police could still keep track of the phone number. At that point, the repeated calls were no longer simply a matter of someone being concerned about my safety. The police had already investigated me multiple times. The university had investigated me. My family had been spoken to. I had talked to counselors and psychologists. There was still no evidence that I was being abused. Yet the calls continued. Eventually, I was told that Kay had been identified as the person repeatedly making the reports. She was eventually facing consequences related to harassment and misuse of police resources. I do not know exactly what happened after that or what the final outcome was. I just knew that I had not seen her for some time. I hoped that meant the situation was finally over. Then I learned there was another problem. Unfortunately, there was more. Some of what I learned next was secondhand, because I was trying very hard to stay away from the drama. Kay did not know where I lived. She knew the general town where I lived, but she did not know my address. Only a very small number of people knew exactly where my house was. One of those people was a classmate I will call Lily. Lily and I had been paired together for a university project. I had invited her to my house so we could work on it. Kay knew that Lily and I were working together. She also knew that Lily had visited my house. However, Kay did not know my address or what my house looked like. There was a connection between Kay and Lily through their extended families, which meant Kay knew who Lily was before we started university. That connection suddenly became important. Lily eventually warned me that Kay's mother was trying to find me. According to Lily, Kay's mother wanted to talk to me and convince me to drop the charges or consequences against Kay. The strange part was that I wasn't the person who had charged Kay. The police were the ones handling the situation. Still, I was terrified. I did not know what Kay's mother intended to do if she found me. So when Lily warned me, I stayed inside my house. I did not go out. I waited until Lily told me that Kay's mother had gone back home. Only then did I feel comfortable leaving. Lily was pressured for my address. Unfortunately, the situation did not stop there. Kay's mother apparently began contacting Lily. She wanted Lily to give her my address. The goal seemed to be to find my house so she could come directly to my door instead of driving around the area hoping to find me. Lily refused. She did not give her my address. She also deleted the messages between us because she wanted to make sure that nobody could use those conversations to figure out where I lived. At that point, I realized how far this situation had gone. It had started with bruises. A classmate saw me with bruises and became worried. Then there were police reports. Then university investigations. Then counseling and psychological evaluations. Then another police report. Then more reports. Then the university changed our lab schedules. Then Kay became angry with me. Then the police began tracking the repeated calls. And eventually, her mother was trying to find my home. All because some people could not accept the explanation for my bruises. I understand why someone might have been worried. I want to make one thing clear. I am not saying that people should ignore signs of abuse. If you genuinely believe someone is being hurt, you should take that seriously. If you see a person constantly covered in unexplained bruises, it is reasonable to be concerned. I am also grateful that the first police officers and university staff took the situation seriously. They did their jobs. They checked on me. They talked to my family. They made sure I was safe. They spoke to me privately. They involved professionals who could help determine whether there were signs of abuse. And after doing all of that, they believed me. My problem was not that someone cared. My problem was that someone continued to treat me like I was a victim who needed to be rescued after every investigation had already shown otherwise. There is a huge difference between saying, "I'm worried about you, are you okay?" and repeatedly involving the police after the person has explained the situation and authorities have already investigated it. At some point, concern can turn into control. At some point, trying to help someone can actually make their life harder. And that is exactly what happened to me. I was already dealing with my disability. I was already dealing with my past. I was already dealing with the emotional consequences of having survived abuse. The last thing I needed was to constantly prove to strangers that I was safe. I didn't need someone to save me. I needed people to listen to me. I needed people to believe me when I explained why I had bruises. And most importantly, I needed people to understand that my life belonged to me. I know Kay probably believed she was doing the right thing. Maybe she genuinely thought she was protecting me. But good intentions do not automatically make every action acceptable. Calling the police once because you genuinely believe someone is in danger is one thing. Continuing to call again and again after investigations have repeatedly found no evidence of abuse is something completely different. By the end of all of this, I wasn't scared of my bruises anymore. I was scared of the people who kept trying to investigate them. I never wanted this much attention. I never wanted my classmates discussing my personal life. I never wanted police officers repeatedly coming to my home. I never wanted to worry that someone's family might show up at my door. I simply wanted to attend university, finish my classes, manage my disability, and live my life. Instead, I ended up having to defend myself from people who believed they were defending me. The situation got even worse before it finally started to end. At this point, I honestly thought things could not get any worse. I was wrong. After Lily warned me that Kay's mother was trying to find my address, I became extremely careful about everything. Even if Kay's mother somehow managed to get Lily's phone and somehow guessed or got past her password, she still would not be able to find my address easily. Lily had been very careful about keeping my information private. But I wasn't taking any chances. Lily immediately told the university what was happening. She had proof of the messages she had received from Kay's mother and other people connected to the situation. She printed out the messages and gave copies to the university and the police. Once the university saw the messages, they took the situation much more seriously. University security was informed about Kay's mother and was given information about the car she might be driving. Security was told to watch for her if she came anywhere near campus. I was also given instructions about what to do if she showed up. If Kay's mother appeared on university property, security would make sure I was escorted safely to my car or another secure area. The university also told me that I should park my car in an area covered by security cameras. It felt strange. I had gone from worrying about bruises to worrying about whether someone's family was going to find me. I never thought university would become a place where I had to think about security cameras, locked doors, and escape routes. Luckily, I was doing my clinical placement at that time, so I wasn't spending much time at the main university campus. That actually helped me a lot. Kay had already been removed from the program before clinical placement started, so she didn't know which clinics the students had been assigned to. That meant she didn't know where I was. If she had still been in the program, things could have been much worse because students had access to information about clinical placements. They could see which clinic they were assigned to and, in some cases, which area of the building they would be working in. The thought of someone being able to use that information to find me made me extremely uncomfortable. Thankfully, Kay no longer had access to that information. The university also contacted my clinical placement and explained what was happening. Lily provided pictures and information about Kay's family so that staff at my placement would know who to look out for. They were told not to allow Kay or her family onto the property if they showed up looking for me. For the first time in a while, I felt like there were people around me who were actually trying to protect me. I still didn't know what would happen next. The police had apparently spoken to Kay's family as well. According to Lily, they had been told that any attempt to contact me could be considered harassment. I couldn't personally guarantee that they would listen. At this point, I had learned that people could ignore warnings if they wanted to. The next time I had to return to the university was going to be for my final exams. That was still about 3 weeks away. I kept hoping that by then, everyone would have moved on. I didn't want this situation to follow me into my exams. I was already stressed enough about school. I was in a nursing program, and my exams were important. I needed to focus on studying and completing my clinical requirements. Instead, I was spending part of my time wondering whether Kay's family was going to show up. The one thing that made me feel a little safer was knowing that the university was prepared. I would be in a building with security. There were locked doors. There were cameras. There were staff members who knew what was happening. There were places I could go if I needed help. I hated that I had to think about all of this, but at least I wasn't completely alone. I decided that if nothing else happened, I wasn't going to keep updating everyone about the situation. I wanted to move on. I wanted to finish my exams. I wanted to continue with my nursing program. I wanted my life to become boring again. Honestly, after everything that had happened, boring sounded amazing. So I tried my best to stop thinking about Kay. I focused on studying. I focused on my clinical work. I focused on getting through each day. I also tried to remind myself that the situation was not my fault. I hadn't asked anyone to call the police. I hadn't asked Kay to investigate me. I hadn't asked her family to become involved. I had simply explained that I was not being abused. Some people accepted that. Others refused to. Lily was dealing with her own problems. I also felt terrible for Lily. She had helped me by refusing to give Kay's mother my address. Because of that, her own family started putting pressure on her. They wanted her to give them my information. They wanted my address. They wanted my phone number. They wanted anything that could help them contact me. Lily refused. She was doing everything she could to protect my privacy. She even became extremely careful with her phone. She kept it with her because she was worried that someone might look through it if she left it somewhere unattended. I felt guilty that she was being dragged into this. She had only been my project partner. She had come to my house once because we were working on university work. She never expected that simply knowing where I lived would put her in the middle of such a huge situation. I kept telling her that she didn't have to put herself through all of this for me. But she refused to give my information away. I will always appreciate that. Then came my exams. Eventually, the day of my exams arrived. I tried to put everything else out of my mind. I studied as much as I could. I went into the exams and did my best. And somehow, despite everything happening around me, I passed. I passed all of my exams. I was moving forward in my nursing program. For a moment, I felt like I could finally breathe. I thought that maybe this was the beginning of the end. Then, only a few days after finishing my exams, I received a message telling me to attend a meeting. I wasn't told what the meeting was about. That immediately made me nervous. When I arrived, I saw the dean, several of my professors, and the head of the nursing program. They all looked extremely serious. I remember sitting there wondering what I had done wrong. My mind immediately started racing. Had I made a mistake during my clinical placement? Was there a problem with one of my exams? Was I being removed from the program? One of my professors noticed how frightened I looked. She quickly told me that they did not believe I had done anything wrong. But they needed to talk to me about an accusation. I asked what the accusation was. Then she told me. Someone had reported that I had cheated on my exams. I honestly felt like my stomach dropped. Cheating on exams was extremely serious where I lived. It wasn't the kind of thing where you got a warning and moved on. Students caught cheating could be expelled. In some circumstances, being expelled for cheating could make it extremely difficult to continue their education somewhere else. My entire future could have been destroyed by an accusation. I immediately told them that I had never cheated. I told them I had taken my exams honestly. They explained that they were going to check my university account and the computer records connected to my exams. They wanted to see if there had been any suspicious activity. If they found evidence that I had cheated, I could be expelled. But if they found nothing, they would treat the report as a false accusation. They also said they had an idea who might be behind the accusation. At that moment, I still wasn't thinking about Kay. I had been trying so hard to move on from the situation that she wasn't even the first person who came to my mind. Then I started thinking about everything that had happened. The police reports. The repeated calls. The harassment. The problems with Kay. And suddenly, I wondered whether this was another attempt to damage my life. Thankfully, they checked everything. The waiting was horrible. I kept thinking about everything I had worked for. I had spent so much time studying. I had passed my exams. I was continuing through my nursing program. I had already been through months of stress because of something that wasn't even my fault. Now I was sitting there wondering if a false accusation could destroy everything. Thankfully, I didn't have to wait very long. The university checked my account and the relevant exam records. They found nothing. No cheating. No suspicious activity. No evidence that I had done anything wrong. The accusation was completely unsupported. I was relieved, but I was also angry. How many times was someone going to try to interfere with my life? How many times would I have to prove that I wasn't doing anything wrong? The university told me that they would forward the information about the person who made the accusation to the police. That was when things took another turn. The police contacted me. The police later contacted me. They explained that the report about me cheating had apparently come from someone connected to Kay. It wasn't Kay herself. According to what I was told, it was a relative of hers. I was shocked. I had spent so much time thinking that maybe Kay was finally out of my life. Apparently, that wasn't the case. The police also told me that Kay was currently dealing with serious legal problems because of the previous incidents. I was told that she had attempted to leave the country while she was out on bail and was considered a flight risk. Because of that, she was being held while waiting for her trial. Hearing all of that was surreal. This entire situation had started because someone thought the bruises on my body meant I was being abused. Now there were police investigations, harassment allegations, university security measures, and legal proceedings. I never wanted any of this. I never asked for it. I didn't want Kay to ruin her life. I just wanted her to stop interfering with mine. The police gave me some advice. The officer I spoke with strongly suggested that I get a restraining order. They recommended that I consider protecting myself not only from Kay, but also from her family and anyone acting on her behalf. The idea was to make it clear that they could not contact me through other people. I had already experienced what could happen when someone tried to get my information through Lily. I didn't want to wait until someone actually showed up at my house. So I decided that I was going to pursue a restraining order. I hoped the university would help me with the process. The university had been supportive throughout everything, but they also admitted that there were limits to what they could do. They could ban people from campus. They could change my schedule. They could warn security. They could protect my information. But they couldn't control what people did outside university property. I think the university felt frustrated too. They had tried to protect me, but they couldn't stop every person from making a phone call or spreading a rumor. They also told me that I should not have contact with Kay on university property. From that, I understood that she had officially been removed from the university. That gave me some relief. At least I didn't have to worry about suddenly seeing her in class. I just want this to be over. I honestly hope this is my last update. I never wanted to keep talking about this. I never wanted my life to turn into a series of updates about police reports, university meetings, security concerns, and accusations. I just wanted to study. I wanted to become a nurse. I wanted to get through university and build a normal future for myself. Instead, I spent months dealing with someone who believed she knew more about my life than I did. I understand that Kay may have genuinely believed she was helping me. Maybe she really thought my bruises were evidence of abuse. Maybe she thought I was too scared to admit what was happening. But she didn't know me well enough to make those decisions for me. She didn't know my medical situation. She didn't know my history. She didn't know about the abuse I had experienced in the past. She didn't know how difficult it was for me to deal with people constantly questioning whether I was telling the truth. And she definitely didn't know what it felt like to have the police repeatedly show up because someone else had decided that my explanation wasn't good enough. There is nothing wrong with asking someone if they are okay. There is nothing wrong with encouraging someone to get help. There is nothing wrong with reporting something when you genuinely believe someone is in danger. But once professionals have investigated, the person has explained the situation, and there is no evidence of abuse, continuing to report the same thing over and over can become harmful. I needed support, not surveillance. I needed people to listen, not people to make decisions for me. And I definitely didn't need strangers or relatives trying to find my home. For now, I am trying to put all of this behind me. I passed my exams. I am still in my nursing program. I am continuing my clinical work. I am trying to focus on my future instead of everything that happened in the past few months. I don't know exactly what will happen with Kay's legal case. I don't know what will happen with her family. I don't know whether they will try anything else. But I do know that I am taking precautions. My university knows what happened. Security knows. My clinical placement knows. The police know. And the people I trust know what is going on. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I have some control over my own life again. I wish it had never gotten this far. I wish Kay had simply asked me if I was okay. I wish she had listened when I explained my disability. I wish the first police investigation had been the end of it. Most of all, I wish everyone involved understood that helping someone also means respecting their answer. I am the person living in my body. I am the person who knows my own life. And I am the person who has to live with the consequences of everything that happens. All I ever wanted was to be believed when I said, I'm okay. Now, after everything that has happened, I just want to finish school, become a nurse, and finally have a peaceful life.